Welcome to Redirect, Immigration Law and Perspectives, a weekly dive into the world of immigration law and its human consequences. I'm your host, Stephen Robbins, joined shortly by co-host and fellow immigration attorney Matthew Archambault. This week we are talking to a couple of colleagues, Adriana Zambrano and Bridget Cambria. Adriana is a law grad and legal assistant with the Defending Vulnerable Populations program at Kline. She works with formerly separated families. And Bridget Cambria, she's a volunteer attorney and executive director with Aldea, the People's Justice Center, and partner at Cambria and Kline, an immigration law firm in Reading, Pennsylvania. Bridget is, on the one hand, very impressive. On the other hand, she seems to be friends with Matthew, which calls into question some of her judgment. But other than that seems to be the one flaw with Bridget. Other than that, these are a couple of incredible colleagues. And we wanted to talk a little bit about how the system is supposed to work when children are apprehended at the border. What does the law mandate that Border Patrol do, and how is it that the practice on the ground doesn't always match up with the standards that we've set? People may have seen this video that was released by ProPublica of Carlos Gregorio Hernandez Vasquez, a 16-year-old Guatemalan migrant who was held in a sort of quarantine concrete cage, essentially. No bed, nothing in there other than some aluminum blankets. And he was very, very ill, and he tragically passed away. The video is very dramatic and frankly hard to watch, but it's worth watching to see not just what happened to him, but to then see the efforts by Border Patrol to cover this up. We talk about that and how people can help. This is a time where people are maybe feeling like there's not a lot they can do, when in fact the opposite is true. There's so much that needs to be done. There's such a huge need. I did want to just mention one thing we didn't get the chance to talk about is the role of rhetoric in all of this. Sometimes when the president says Mexicans are rapists and murderers and they come from whole countries and they're criminals or they're gang members, or even Steve King, we used to play the clip all the time of the Dreamers aren't all valedictorians. Many of them have calves the size of cantaloupes because they've been trafficking 75-pound bags of marijuana across the desert, which is totally how drug trafficking happens, by the way. I think sometimes I've thought of rhetoric as being something that would inspire hate crimes or turn people into sort of frothy-mouthed anti-immigrant advocates. And what I think I'm starting to see and understand, frankly, is that the real effect of most of this rhetoric is to just deaden the blow of stories like the one of Carlos. It's not that most people hear those types of things and then become hood-wearing members of the Klan. It's just that it develops a sort of sense, a subconscious understanding for a lot of people that immigration and crime and gangs and all these things are just kind of one big cloud. People are busy and things are confusing and they don't have time to read everything and follow the news. And so everything just becomes one sort of, again, a big cloud where all these things become associated with each other. And what that allows for a society to do is not necessarily build a massive system of concentration camps, but allows for stories like this one to sort of fall on desensitized ears. Obviously, a lot of people are hearing about this story are outraged. People want to get to the bottom of what happened, and that's great. That's what we need to be. But so many people are hearing about this or won't even hear about it and won't even necessarily make the news. And for a lot of people who do hear about it, they've just come to understand that all those things are one big issue. Crime, gangs, immigration, etc. And that's the real danger, I think, of all of the rhetoric that we've had out of this administration. So anyhow, enjoy the conversation with Matthew, Cambria, and Adriana. If you like the show, go to patreon.com/redirect, become a patron. We'd really appreciate it. I did mention at the end of the show that, normally for every 100 patrons, we take a pro bono case. And we're sitting at about 127. And I agreed that we would take another pro bono case if we just get another 20. So I'm lowering the bar. So if we can get to 147, then Matthew and I will take another pro bono case. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Now, Matthew, yesterday you texted me. We were joking about this Trump, and for the producer, if you could just bleep out every time we say, because some people are sensitive about that. You said sarcastically, what about kids are in cafes, but someone mentioned his name. What's next?
Cafes?
Sharia law.
Cafes?
Yeah, so you had an autocorrect, which changed what I presume was supposed to be cages to cafes. So I spent all morning yesterday imagining a world where our primary concern was that kids are spending too much time in cafes, and what are we going to do about it? And it was actually kind of nice, you know? It was a nice little comfortable concern to have, but alas, here we are.
Yeah, you know, when I go to Montreal, there's this cafe it's a manga bookstore, but it's like a cafe, and kids like hang out there.
Yeah.
They just sit there and read.
What are we going to do about that?
I don't know. It seems like Canada's problem, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Let's not get involved.
So our guests here, both of them, Bridget and Adriana, why don't you guys introduce yourselves to the folks? Tell us about who you are and what you're all about. Favorite basketball team?
My favorite basketball team is the Sixers because I'm a loyal Pennsylvanian, as should Matthew Archambault, but I don't know if he actually supports anything. But I am an immigration attorney in Reading, Pennsylvania, and I have a private law office called Cambria and Kline, where we represent a ton of people in Pennsylvania, and then we also have a nonprofit that's called Aldea, the People's Justice Center. And under that organization, we provide universal representation to all families in detention in the state of Pennsylvania. And we also have expanded to provide pro bono services to York Prison. And the great news is, for some reason, EOIR approved us as a pro bono service provider. So, we're actually legitimate now. So,
wow. Yeah. You guys work together? Is that the deal?
No. We're separate entities. We have separate staff, but the attorneys are volunteers, except the ones that are paid. So I'm a volunteer attorney with Aldea, but my main office is my normal office.
Adriana, tell us about yourself.
Right. So I'm a legal assistant, law graduate with the Defending Vulnerable Populations program at Clinic. And just like Bridget, while the focus of my work is with Clinic, I also volunteer with the families at Berks quite a bit.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. We like to give our guests lots of notice, and so we've had lots of time to prepare, and we appreciate that. I wanted to talk to you guys real quick to get us started. I don't know if you saw this story, but the day before Thanksgiving, friend of the show, Martin O'Malley, lit into, quote unquote, Ken Cuccinelli at a bar.
It's Kenneth Ken Cuccinelli.
Homeland Ken.
And it was a shame-invoking tirade. Apparently, he said something about kids in cages. And so everybody was pretty stoked about that. But I did see some people on the Twitter machine saying, well, the kids in cages thing, that's not really fair to levy against Cuccinelli because Cuccinelli wasn't over the quote-unquote kids in cages thing, as if kids in cages were like a strictly defined period of time or a thing that happened and now it's over. And I just wanted to get your guys' response to that particular critique.
Well, I don't know if I can openly support public shaming, but the confrontation of Ken Cuccinelli from somebody who should be respected, Martin O'Malley has a great track record, actually, with unaccompanied minors. So he knows what he's talking about. I believe that was a pretty good move on the part of O'Malley because he's coming from a position where he has some authority and he has some knowledge. Ken Cuccinelli, I can't say the same for. And as far as the kids in cages, that's been going on as long as we've all probably been practicing, and it's still going on now. It was only in the news for the period of time during family separation because we got to see them in cages. But kids are still in ice boxes every single day. We see kids coming into Berks that have been sitting in ice boxes for up to 12 days. We're talking kids as young as 1 year old. Nothing's changed. It's exactly the same as it was in 2014 when kids were coming to family detention from ice boxes. There's absolutely no difference. And no matter how much money they give to DHS, that does not change. Kids are still in cages.
Well, I just want to say for the record, I'm actually a big fan of King Cuccinelli, and insofar as he's adjudicating my adjustment cases that are pending.
I don't think he's in USCIS anymore. Stephen.
I think you can be honest now, Stephen.
Well,
yeah, he's gone. I think it's Chad. Is it Chad Wolf or is Chad Wolf DHS?
He's DHS. I know it's hard to keep track. Nobody knows who's in charge of USCIS right now. There is no.
Can I say something about Chad Wolf? I don't really know anything about him, but he kind of looks like an.
All right, now come on, guys.
I'm just saying, it's just an observation.
It's kind of like the guy that in high school was mean to you, probably Matthew. Kind of.
I mean that was really kind of everybody.
Matthew was the mean guy. I think you guys have that backwards. All right. Well, so we've talked about this before, but I think it's good to refresh people's memories and to try and understand the system, because we just see bits and pieces of the news and, sort of what's going on. But can you guys explain what the system is for a young child, let's say 15 years old, who arrives at the border, they're detained? What is supposed to happen with them? Like, what does the law mandate?
Oh, that's easy. So what the law mandates is that anyone in the agency of the Department of Homeland Security, so that's every single agency, it also includes EOIR, by the way, has an obligation to immediately and constantly attempt to place the child in a place that is the least restrictive environment available. So what that means is as soon as a child comes into custody, a Border Patrol officer has to immediately begin making efforts to place that child somewhere safe. And they can, in no circumstances, keep a child longer than 72 hours. So they're not doing that.
Well, so then what do they do after those 72 hours? What happens after that? What are they supposed to do?
Well, they're not supposed to be in an icebox beyond 72 hours. So normally what the process is they will place the child, if they're unaccompanied, they'll place the child in ORR custody for the purposes of placement with, hopefully, a close family or friend who's willing to assume care of the child. That's also supposed to occur rapidly, but doesn't often happen that way.
So ORR is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. What do they do exactly? For people who don't, I obviously know all of this.
Sure. They're under the office of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They're charged with providing care for unaccompanied minors. So those are children with no parents in the United States. And their job is to follow the Flores regulations and, again, attempt to, as soon as possible, place a child in an environment that is the least restrictive environment. And they have a cache of different people that can assume that role, preferences with parents, close family members, uncles, aunts, grandparents, siblings, and even people who are willing to just simply assume care. So their job is to protect the child and to place the child in a safe environment.
And everything's working as it should, right?
No.
But Bridget, do you think, okay, I was being rhetorical because we know it's not. Privately, me and Bridget may have expressed some displeasure with our past president, Obama. Do you think things are the same, better, or worse when Obama
they're
was
absolutely worse.
around?
It's absolutely worse. So it was bad under Obama, and it was bad under Obama because you had the detention periods, which were indefinite. So there was really no way to get your family out of detention. The difference now is we're killing kids. I think that's a stretch that's gone a little too far.
Really? You think?
She did say
You're going to make that bold statement?
I'm going to say
a little too far.
I apologize for not being assertive enough. I think that when one child dies, we need to shut the whole thing down and figure out what's happening. And instead, we've had 7 and no accountability. So, yeah, that's a really big problem.
I met Bridget at the Berks family prison up in Berks County, Pennsylvania. And one of Bridget's clients, I remember, was very ill and actually vomited blood all over her shirt. And I think Bridget kept the shirt as a ghoulish reminder as to what her mission was. But that child had an advocate who could make sure that she eventually got the medical care she needed. And there are just a lack of Bridget's running all over the place looking out. We can't be in these holding cells and facilities always advocating. And we see that without advocates, these things are happening.
That's right.
The difference in the administration now is that it's not just the detention. They're attacking everyone.
What I also notice is that even when these families have an advocate here at the facility, or for example, in separated families, there are a lot of attorneys who are able to take kids' cases. A lot of the times, these children also don't have the support that they need once they leave detention with all the trauma and all the fear because of what's been done to them. So that's another huge gap to fill.
Right. There's also a huge problem with, let's be honest, just because you have a lawyer doesn't mean they're any good. And I think, Matthew's here sort of as a testament to that. So, it's not enough to just have a lawyer, in other words. I wanted to talk about the system as it's supposed to exist so we could compare it to what happened in the case of Carlos Gregorio Hernandez Vasquez. Now, people might have seen this story. The video was released by ProPublica.
And if you haven't seen this story, we'll link to it on our Facebook page and we'll tweet it out. Yeah. And you have to, I'm sorry, but you have to watch it. I didn't want to watch it. It's come across my feed a bunch of times, and then I finally watched it, and you're just required to watch it.
Well, I'm going to push back on that because I think there's a pretty strong trigger warning anytime you watch something like this.
Don't get triggered.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Well, okay.
It's very hard to watch.
Very hard to watch, and I don't know that it should be required, but that's fine. I do think it was worthwhile to see the conditions. So, Bridget, if you can describe the cell that these two sick children were in.
It's just a basic, it's a concrete floor, concrete walls, concrete bench. There's a bunch of aluminum foil blankets or sheets screwed about. In one corner, there's a big blob of aluminum foil. Then you find out later it's actually a child who's sick that's underneath there sleeping. And Carlos is in obvious distress. He's lying without a blanket. He's fidgeting around, moving, and it's what our clients describe to us. When you get to see it, it's like a human shouldn't be in that type of environment for more than a few hours.
Right.
They're certainly not designed to house people, to have people sleep and spend a period of time that these two very, very sick children were in.
I guess we should back up real quick just for people who don't know the story. Carlos was a 16-year-old Guatemalan migrant. He was apprehended at the border along with, I believe he was with his adult sister, and he was diagnosed with the flu by a nurse practitioner at the Border Patrol's processing center in McAllen, Texas. He had a fever of 103 degrees, and so he was sent to a neighboring Border Patrol station in Willasco, and that's where he was held in this. Some people are saying we're not allowed to say kids in cages, but it's basically a concrete box. These aren't even beds, right? It looks like a concrete slab, essentially.
It's a bench, right? It's a concrete bench that you would sit on for a little bit of time while you're being processed to do something.
Now, Bridget explained earlier, they're only allowed to hold these kids for 72 hours, but he was actually detained for 6 days.
And it would have been more, just to be clear.
Right.
If he didn't die.
So the video shows he was in obvious pain, and he goes back behind a wall near the toilet and slumps down, and that's where he tragically passed away. What about you, Adriana? Can you talk about the efforts by CBP to hide these conditions and cover up what happened?
It is so obvious. It is so shameless. The fact that the portion of the footage that could have in some way quasi-absolved them or proven their theory or their whatever it is that they said that they were doing well checks and that they found them when they were doing a well check. That is exactly the part of the footage that was missing, So that definitely makes you think about how in your face they are about their dishonesty and their reliance that they can get away with anything, right? Right. And the same thing happened in the case of Roxana, the trans woman who died in the trans spot in Cibola. The footage that the attorneys received was also critically cut off in the more crucial parts that could have absolved and kind of verified the version of CBP and of ICE and of the facility there. It's just missing.
Right. So I believe it's about a 4-hour block that's just gone from the video.
Right.
And during that time, supposedly, an officer had filled out a sort of logbook claiming to have done well checks 3 different times during that span. CBP also claimed that they discovered the body doing a well check, but in fact, it was the cellmate who woke up and discovered the body and brought it to the attention of the officers.
Well, I mean, isn't this just a long run-in tradition of CBP not being held accountable? I mean, it might get tiresome to always go, well, before Trump, but CBP hasn't been held accountable ever. It's not like they just started to suck, right? I mean, they've been run by white supremacists and just animals for years and years, and they've gotten away with killing people on the border, shooting them through the fence. So maybe now with Trump, the media is going to be paying more attention and it brings it out. But these are things that they've been guilty of since there has been a CBP.
Well, I mean, we all saw the video. That kid was sitting there for hours. And in hours, not a single person walked into that cell. And not a single one of us probably realized that there was another child under an aluminum blanket in that cell as well. And the moment that that child went over and saw that his companion was slumped next to a toilet, his head in a puddle of blood, and he goes and he just knocks on a window, you see how many people are in that office. All of them who had responsibility to simply check on him. This is supposed to be the office that provides care for sick kids. This is the cell for sick kids.
Right.
Imagine that, right? That kid needed a bed. He needed a real blanket. He needed a doctor. He needed a nurse. He needed an IV, perhaps. He needed medicine. All of those things.
Now, wasn't the camera connected to a monitor that these people could see outside? Or, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but it would seem like...
We would hope, right?
I don't think Border Patrol has answered that particular question. That was one of the questions in the
so
article.
It's not like they had to walk into the cell to see a guy kind of lying on the floor by the toilet.
Yeah, but was it really that far away? Was it that difficult?
I mean...
It certainly didn't take them long to walk in when the kid knocked on the door to alert them. There were 6 of them right there. It just shows the lack of actual care. And that's their responsibility. They might not like it, but when a kid comes into their custody, it's immediately their responsibility to provide care for that child. And it wouldn't be hard. In fact, it probably would be easier for them to send that child to a hospital where someone else will provide the care that they don't want to give. But that's not the point. The point is to punish every child that comes into their custody. And they punish them in a hilaire. That's the first stop of their terror. So until they realize that the kids that they are detaining are human beings that deserve the same type of care that their children do, it's not going to change. They're following longstanding policies that do not distinguish between adults and children. Not that any human being should be treated like that, but they're under a duty, a legal obligation to provide better care for children. They don't do that because they aren't trained to do that. They aren't trained to show compassion. In fact, if they show compassion, they're probably reprimanded. It's a system that's built for enforcement. It's not built for providing care for these kids. And I mean, there's no more example more apparent than family separation, which is just one of the many building blocks that this administration has embarked on in order to restrict children from accessing asylum.
Has Border Patrol provided a reason why, not that there would be a good reason, but an explanation for why they seem to have violated the law by keeping him in this box for more than the allowed amount of time? I mean, what is their justification in this particular case? Do we know?
In this case, I don't believe they made a comment. I believe their comment was that they discovered the child during a welfare check, which this video shows that that's not the case. I don't believe that they've actually responded to the video being released, because how do you respond to it? I don't think you can. It's horrific. And it was really difficult for me to watch. I hope it was difficult for everyone else, because what I saw in there was every single one of the kids that I see every single day. And it was very difficult to watch. So you see this kid who was there, I think it was 6 days. I have clients that are babies. We're talking 1-year-old, 4-year-old that are in their 12 days.
Oh, yeah. We have a 10-month-old at Berks who spent, I think, a week in a hielera. And it is pretty common to see infants and toddlers spending over a week with their parents in hieleras.
So obviously their response is that it's a rebuke of their obligations under the Flores settlement. I think in this case, they actually misrepresented what happened to this young boy to the Flores monitor. I have no idea how anyone responds to this, but it has to start with accountability from the top. And who's going to do that in this administration? Who's going to take that step to hold anyone accountable? And if not, which agencies in these states, by the way, the state of Texas, permitting this to happen, somebody's going to have to step up. Some child welfare agency is going to have to step up and support the kids that are in these boxes.
And I think the article that accompanied the video, I think it said that ProPublica reached CBP for comment, specifically regarding the inconsistency of their version with the video. And they offered no comment. So they've definitely been asked. So they're probably scrambling to come up with a lie to cover up the lie.
Not to get too Glenn Beck chalkboardy conspiratorial, I don't even think it's a conspiracy to say that this seems to be, in a way, kind of a desired outcome for them, in the sense that even if we go back to comments from President Obama and Secretary Clinton at the time, there was a desire to sort of send a message to the children and the parents of Central America that if you come here, things are going to be real hard and we're just going to send you right back. So there was a desire going back to the previous administration to create a deterrent. And obviously they're trying to find some sort of legal defense, I suppose, but they probably unfurled a mission accomplished banner in a sense when something like this happens, it seems to me.
Well, they don't really need a legal defense, right? I mean, because they're not going to be held accountable. And that's just a fact. And again, this is a historical non-accountability for CBP. And under this administration, Democrats might hold some hearings about it, but it doesn't mean anything.
Well, let's think about how many deterrent messages this administration has sent, right? So 7 children have died in custody. We've seen giant funerals in their countries where families have seen this. We're putting children and adults in Mexico for months to years, subjecting them to kidnapping, rape, ransom, other types of assaults. We've separated kids from their parents. We have enacted an asylum ban, and most people don't realize right now, however, we've additionally changed credible fear screening to an automatic denial. So the credible fear standards, which once were an 80 to 90% success rate, are now a 10% success rate. Think about that. Every legal barrier or wall that they have wanted to enact, they've enacted. And the whole point is to show deterrence, and it's failed in every single way. So people are going to keep coming. It's how do we as attorneys do our due diligence and hold the administration accountable? I think using the federal courts in a means to sue for the rights of our clients is the number one way to do it. I know that in MPP here in the Third Circuit, Matthew has joined us in filing suits to hold the government accountable in that respect for these children who have perished. I know that there are really amazing attorneys out there looking for ways to vindicate the rights of not only the parents, but the children and their families in Guatemala, for the most part. And it's also really important that anyone that comes upon a separated family case goes to court. We have a means to hold the government accountable for at least that action. We can file federal tort claims for every single child that was separated and hold the government accountable and compensate not only the child, but punish the people who enacted in these schemes, which the sole point, like you had just mentioned, was deterrence. And what we did is we used the lives and the well-being of children to send a message. And not only did we send a message, but we sent some of them back in boxes.
Right.
And we should be horrified as a nation for that. And there are great organizations like Adriana's organization, which is working to make sure that, for example, separated families have a means to find attorneys and sue for these rights.
I don't think this is Border Patrol's defense, obviously, like we were just talking about, but I think some people who are maybe not paying that close of attention, who just sort of see this on the news, they might have a sense that like everything at the border is sort of chaotic and they're really strained on resources. And these are just things that inevitably will happen because of the sort of sheer nature of the issue. I mean, what do you say to people who have that sort of vague idea in the back of their minds?
No. The answer is that's a huge misstatement and lie. I mean, the fact that you can't give a toothbrush to a child because you can't afford it. The Department of Homeland Security is probably the most funded agency. It's bloated. There's so much money going into enforcement, and there's so much money going into all of these schemes that are probably unlawful. There is no shortage of funds. There is no shortage of funds to be able to care for people that come to our shores. Like every other country that's privileged enough to have a safe place to live, there is absolutely no reason why we can't provide simple necessities for children that literally just maintain life. That's it.
Right.
And the other thing, just not to forget, they don't have to hold them, right? Their legal obligation is to get them out of custody as quickly as possible. They're not working towards that. They're working towards a wall, and they're working towards these insane legal gymnastics that they're trying to do to prevent people from simply accessing a court.
Right. So for people who might be listening to this and they're getting kind of sad and depressed, but they also feel like the border is really far away and it's this nebulous problem, what's something like real and concrete that they can do today and tomorrow to make a difference?
I think we need lawyers and we need legal assistants. We need paralegals. We need interpreters. And for those people who cannot provide those services themselves, there are so many opportunities to support other organizations who can. So I think I would encourage that. I know it's really hard and really uncomfortable to have to ask for money or to have to ask for free work, but sometimes that's just kind of what it takes.
I know Bridget's never really shy about asking me for free work. So.
Well,
neither I am. That's kind of my job.
There's really lots of things. There's lots of things that people can do. And we saw it after family separation. Like that was the only time when we've seen a movement of not only lawyers, but communities and individual people. I think constantly staying vigilant is important and engaging with the nonprofit organizations that work every day to help the most vulnerable populations. That's the way you do it. And if you're an attorney and listening, which frankly, Matthew, probably the only people listening are attorneys, you should take cases, as many as you can, that involve vulnerable children, even if it's hard. It's really challenging work emotionally, but in success, it's probably the most rewarding. And making the partnerships with organizations like Aldea or going down to Dili and spending a week with Shay and learning some of the most crazy stories, going out to California and sitting with El Otro Lado, becoming an affiliate of Clinic and learning and accessing all of the amazing resources that they have. There's a lot of people out there that need help that some don't even realize it yet. And we need to stay vigilant. We have probably a million case backlog now. How many immigration lawyers are there?
Right.
And even for lawyers that don't have as much experience practicing in immigration, there are options out there. I know that Clinic is not the only one who has come up with some kind of mentoring or technical assistance program to introduce attorneys to this kind of lawless area of the law. And yeah, I think joining these efforts and expanding the possibilities as an attorney, it's also worth exploring.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times the thing that our clients need the most is a human being to talk to. And that's probably the hardest thing for an attorney to do, you know, is to take off the lawyer hat and just realize for a second that our clients are in really bad shape and they're targeted by the administration in the most cruel ways. And, you know, how do you deal with that type of client? It's very difficult.
Right. And this is something that we see every day with the Defending Vulnerable Populations program on family separation. So what we started last year was an effort with other organizations like Innovation Law Lab and ASAP, the Asylum Seekers Advocacy Project in New York. And we came together to lead a national project to support separated families. And I know that many other orgs, for example, Highest, Kind, and others have been working with separated families as well. And that needs to be acknowledged. So shout out to everyone out there who has not forgotten about the separated families. It takes more than reunification and release to make them whole, I think. And, you know, now that Bridget is talking about talking to the client and really taking the time to listen and understand their case and educate themselves, it's hard, but it's worth it. And I think that's one of the things that's unique about our project, that we have created a safe space, like a forum where we are constantly in live contact with hundreds of separated families. And as I said before, part of my job is to lawyer them up. But in the course of doing that, this constant communication has turned into so much more than a system for the legal orientation of people. It has also become a space where families can support each other, where they can share experiences that only they have lived, that being all the micro cruelties added to the major cruelty of separation. A space where we get to really see the intense anxiety about being separated again, where we can see, you know, their problems with executive function, like memory, initiation, motivation, and how much harder that makes it to have a legal consultation about something that's really traumatizing. Sometimes the families can support themselves too, sharing their experiences, that the re-traumatization of their kids when they see, for example, a police officer hiding under the table and they see a police officer, or regressing into bedwetting, or, you know, also peeing their pants whenever they see a garbage man, because it turns out that many ORR shelter employees would threaten them that the garbage man was going to take them away if they didn't do what they said, like if they refused to eat or if they refused to whatever. So this way we can really meet them where they're at, understanding more about them than just their legal case. And it's been such an education for us as advocates, because from that understanding, we have created many systems of support. For example, language access. We came up with a partnership with Lyft to give free rides to their legal appointments. We also work on a lot of mental health and physical health referrals, researching and sending people to free health clinics. We provide orientation for legal and social systems beyond immigration. For example, we recently helped a woman who was experiencing domestic abuse have a protective order. We have also helped them with consulates pursuing their passports. We sometimes do preparations for CFIs, preparations for a first day in court if they don't have an attorney or if they're having a scary check-in. And we do also translations and see explanations of different immigration documents. And if there are any people out there who are interested in these kind of like small interventions, please, we welcome that help as well. Other interventions for us have been filling out work permit applications.
So, Adriana, how would they get in contact with you?
Well, you can email me at azambrano@cliniclegal.org, or you could also just call me or text me. My number is...
You want our many hundreds of thousands of listeners to just text you? Or wait, hold on just a second. We don't have that many listeners, but do you really want to give out your cell phone for people to text you?
Well, I was going to give my clinic phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, do it then. That's fine.
Well, I also want to just say one thing. If you missed that, yes, Lyft provides rides to people to get to their immigration appointments. So when your clients have, 1 million check-ins in between their court once every 5 years, you can always reach out to try and get free rides from Lyft. So I would download that app on your phone as opposed to the other, just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can contact me also by calling me at 385-237-4933. This is my clinic number, and I receive text messages there too. So if it's easier for you to text message me and just establish communication that way, I know that sometimes our inboxes are just completely flooded. And yeah, I think it's good to be in contact more than through email with attorneys or volunteers who are really trying to understand where the families are coming from.
And for those private attorneys who, that we're attorneys, but also we run businesses and we have to worry about bottom lines. We have to worry about our families, student loans. There are a lot of stuff we have to worry about. But I have to say that since I do a lot of pro bono cases and I'm doing just fine, you can do it. Like you can do it. Financially, I'm doing fine. You can certainly balance pro bono or low bono cases and still be okay financially and still make a profit. Don't look at it as like, oh no, I can't take on these pro bono cases or pro bono case because, I'm struggling. I think you'll find that the more that you give back in this way, you'll get it back. I mean, just think about it. Let's say you take 2 pro bono cases for a Honduran family and a Guatemalan family that live in your city, right? And you do a good job and they're going to be appreciative. They're going to be telling their friends. Word gets out in the community. Your name gets out there.
Absolutely.
And then that comes back to you. It really does. So it goes beyond just doing a good thing. You're going to be helping yourself too.
Yeah.
And then the word gets out. Everyone's going to want pro bono things, but you don't have to give everybody pro bono. You can give them low bono. You can do other things like Adriana is saying, other small things. But the thing is to get involved. Don't shy away from these cases. There are cases that people come in and they don't really have a great claim. They might not. Even those people really need your help.
Right.
And one question I ask all my clients in this situation, I ask where they're living, I ask who they're living with, and I ask if they feel safe. And lots of times, most of the time, they say they feel safe, but there are times they say, no, they don't feel safe. And you know what? Then we have different roles, right? I feel it's my obligation to try to get them to a safe place.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of organizations. You become a kind of a social worker in that you're trying to find these organizations that can help. And maybe it comes from a person that didn't really have a great claim who you might have been willing to just kind of like, put out of your office early because nothing you can do.
Yeah.
But you find that there are things that you can do. You'll feel better about yourself. You'll become a better lawyer and it will come back to you.
Right. And Matthew, these are not even necessarily pro bono requests. There are...
All of Bridget's requests for me are pro bono requests.
Well, that's because I'm from Aldea and we have no money.
Oh.
Sorry.
They're actually pro bono demands. They're actually orders. It's okay.
Moral requirements. No, not necessarily pro bono. We have been working with Raisa's Legal Defense Fund. And so far, they have funded every case that we have referred to them. And they are providing assistance to clients with their legal fees. And they're quite reasonable. The money that they pay out is actually quite reasonable.
Yeah, so if you're willing to take a separated case or you find one, you should reach out to see if that qualifies to actually get you reimbursed for your legal fees, probably more than you would actually get paid.
Yep. Yeah. And in addition to that, we also provide a lot of technical assistance and mentoring, and we've been very successful in that area of the project. And the purpose of that is to make it easier and less time consuming and less of an uphill battle and a learning curve for attorneys who may not have a lot of experience in removal defense or for attorneys who don't have a lot of experience in asylum. We can work together. Don't shy away from these cases. These are hard but winnable cases with the proper legal assistance and with the right support, and we can totally work together.
Right. And if the producer wants to cut out all of that and get them to say that they should just become patrons of this show instead of all of that stuff.
Hey, Steven, I became a patron.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
I became a patron in the good people tier.
Good. Oh,
Did we
wow.
push
That's
you?
very compelling.
Did we push you over the edge? Where now?
Wait. Bridget, Adriana said she became a patron. She didn't say you did. Did you come as well?
I did not yet, but if you're willing to take a pro bono case,
Again,
I will become a patron.
Right. I think you're only like 20 something away.
Are they 20 something away from that?
From the 200 to get a second pro bono.
Oh,
client,
wait.
which
20
would likely
people,
be
not $20.
Yeah, 20 patrons.
Oh, well, there have to be like at least 19 people that might listen to this. So
right.
And
it's funny, I got a confirmation message right after that saying that the next pro bono case that they will take will be a separated family.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Really weird.
I don't think that. I think that's false. But all right. Well, let's see. Okay, so I don't think we're that close, but let's say this: if we get another 20, we're going to lower the bar, and we'll take another pro bono case, and we'll take it from you guys.
Wow.
How about that? And by we, of course, I mean Matthew. He's closer, and it's hard for me. I'm really far away. So
I'm sure I have a really complicated, like, circuit court jurisdictional case that we can assign to.
Sure.
That involves like a really small child that's, in really severe danger, that everything's riding on it. So.
Oh, perfect. I like those low pressure cases. Well, Adriana.
Steve won't get the kid voluntary departure.
I'm kind of like, I don't want to brag about this, but kind of like the voluntary departure guru around here.
Didn't you teach Michael Avenatti how to do that?
I'm real good at pre-conclusion, like just withdrawing everything. That's a joke. But thank you guys so much for coming on. And yeah, we really appreciate your time and all that you do. It's so important.
Thanks, guys. You're pretty entertaining.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Pretty
We listen to your podcast while baking pies a lot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You know what? Somebody made me recently a hazelnut pie, and it was pretty much the best thing ever. So
wow.
Well, Bridget just made a cherry and raspberry pie for Thanksgiving.
That's all I could do because I wasn't allowed to work for several weeks.
Bake pies.
Well, before we go, I just wanted, so one thing people should understand about Bridget, when she's in court and when she's dealing with these people that make you want to just like rip out their eyeballs and like flip tables, she is so cool. She's just like, yeah. She's the type of person that if they're in a bar and everyone's like beating each other over the heads with chairs and tables, she would just kind of like walk through calmly and walk up to the bar and sit down and order a beer. It's just nothing like when I see her in court. I'm like about ready to just rip the like U.S. attorney's like throat out because it's such unreasonable and like awful positions. And Bridget's like, yeah, okay. And she's like pouring water, very cool, very calm. It's actually calm and nice to see because she's very articulate and very smart and knows the law and is very effective. So
wow, that's like the nicest thing, Matthew. And I'll just say that you did leave me with an empty cup of water at the council table last time.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, but
I failed my only job.
No, you put on many hats, Matthew. And I will admit that it was nice to sit with you at council's table because you said the things that were in my head, but that I sometimes think it's a little disrespectful to say, but you're completely freewheeling. You'll say whatever's on your mind. And I think that's also extremely important.
Everybody needs an asshole around once in a while. Matthew, right there to
fill the void.
Fill that void, so to speak, if you will. All right, guys, I got to go.
In the studio, grabbing corn grease, sipping on some 15-year-old rum with the Afro-Cuban all-stars cracking our bar.